The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Entering the Stone Zone. Well, the first thing I have to do is to call out the fake news. Just minutes ago, it flashed across my cell phone screen that House Republicans voted unanimously not to release the Jeffrey Epstein records. This is entirely false. I literally just hung up with Congressman Tim Burchett from Tennessee, who said this was a procedural vote. The word Epstein appears nowhere. It was essentially a fugazi, a head fake to give the American people the impression that that was the question on the floor. In fact, it just would have returned or turned control of the floor of Congress over to the Democrats. The Democrats suddenly are in favor of full disclosure when it comes to the Epstein client list or the Epstein material. I think they should be a little careful because based on my own book, The Clintons' War on Women, which I wrote in 2015, longest chapter in the book is chapter 7, titled Orgy Island. I was actually the first American author to write extensively about Jeffrey Epstein. I had the manifest for the Lolita Express. I had extensive information in there pertaining to his little black book. I also document his activities on behalf of the Central Intelligence Agency. But the most prominent people who are on his client list, or the people he was catering to, include Democrats such as former Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell of Maine, former New Mexico Governor and Democrat Bill Richardson, but the most famous of them all, of course, Bill and Hillary Clinton. You see, the difference is President Donald Trump cut Jeffrey Epstein off prior to Epstein being exposed and charged and convicted of sex crimes in Florida. He banished Epstein from all Trump properties and from his life prior to Epstein becoming even remotely controversial. Whereas Bill and Hillary Clinton continued to socialize, to accept millions of dollars from, and to visit Epstein's island multiple times. All this documented in my book, The Clintons' War on Women. You can actually get it by going to EpsteinTruthBook.com. But it is interesting to me now, suddenly, that Ghislaine Maxwell, who was essentially Epstein's pimp, says she's ready to testify publicly and expose Jeffrey Epstein. Now, here's a little-known fact that I determined. The foundation that Maxwell headed, this was in addition to her serving as the chief groomer and procurer of underage girls for Jeffrey Epstein, the Tara Mar Foundation was in fact a grooming pool for young women and was completely and totally funded by multi-million-dollar grants, you guessed it, from the Clinton Foundation. Maxwell is evidently, according to the Daily Mail, ready to spill the beans about the true nature of the Jeffrey Epstein pedophilia operation. Maxwell is looking to share the truth with the masses as she tries to make a deal to get out of prison. Now, it is interesting that Maxwell was never offered any kind of plea deal when she was prosecuted by the Biden administration. Now she sees a path in which she might get out of prison. She's more than happy to sit before Congress and tell her story. No one from the government's ever asked her to share what she knows. She remains the only person to be jailed in connection to Epstein, and she says she would welcome the chance to tell the American people the truth. I think this is a terrific idea because she has nothing whatsoever on Donald Trump, despite efforts in the lamestream media to say otherwise. The Trump administration has emphatically stated that the Epstein killed himself, but as I have said here in the Stone Zone multiple times, there are no records to show the public that that is accurate. In fact, I've reported exactly the opposite. We know that the New York medical examiner, Dr. Michael Baden, one of the most respected pathologists in the country, who examined Epstein's body after his death, showed 3 fractures in his neck, which the doctor said could not reasonably have occurred with Epstein's supposedly makeshift bed sheet noose. Also, the hemorrhages in Epstein's eyes were emblematic of homicide. The aforementioned noose, which did not match the compression marks on Epstein's necks. The cameras conveniently malfunctioned at the time of Epstein's death. The guards deciding it was time to take a nap right as Epstein turned up. Epstein being taken off suicide watch against prison protocol just before he supposedly killed himself. And a cellmate being removed from Epstein's cell, once again, all against prison protocol shortly before Epstein's death, all point to the logical fact that he was murdered. In fact, according to Dr. Baden, the injuries to Epstein were more indicated from strangulation. This could be the greatest single federal cover-up since JFK or 9/11. I now agree with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene that it's probably time for a special prosecutor to clear the air on this entire matter. I think it would be the fastest and easiest way to get to the truth. Now, yesterday in the Stone Zone, we played a speech in which I said that I think President Trump should direct Attorney General Pam Bondi to instruct the interim U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York to move in federal court to unseal all of the grand jury testimony from Epstein's 2019 charges by the Trump Justice Department, in which he was charged with committing child sex trafficking and a second charge of conspiring to engage in child sex trafficking. Now, one cannot conspire alone. That's why I believe that those grand jury records, which are currently sealed, will reveal to us who Jeffrey Epstein's Confederates were. While we're at it, I think it is equally important to unseal the search warrants for Epstein's palatial home in Manhattan, as well as for his island in the Virgin Islands. That would shed enormous light on this entire question. Meanwhile, Steve Bannon continues to withhold 15 hours of video interviews that he did with Epstein. I'm sorry, but I don't understand why Bannon visited with Epstein at his New York residence after Epstein had been charged and convicted of sex crimes in Florida, but prior to his being charged with sex crimes in New York. He also, according to the New York Post, Bannon met with Epstein at his Paris apartment. Again, a special counsel would be the fastest way to shed light on this entire question. The American people deserve to know. And the course of action that I just recommended by the interim U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York would be the fastest way to do it. In fact, I saw Glenn Beck, who perhaps saw my speech this weekend, calling for the same thing. In the meantime, President Donald Trump is now going after shifty Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff of California, the congenital liar. You remember him. He's the guy who said that he had, quote, seen more than circumstantial evidence of Russian collusion with Donald Trump's presidential campaign, but never produced anything of the kind. We now know that Senator Schiff, formerly Congressman Schiff, has been exposed for the same kind of serial mortgage fraud that New York Attorney General Letitia James has been referred to the Justice Department for criminal prosecution for. These allegations stem from Schiff designating his primary residence as being in Maryland back in 2003. He then purchased a condo in Burbank, California in 2009, making a $7,000 property tax reduction under the restrictions that tax exemption is only if a dwelling must be the person's true, fixed, and permanent home and principal establishment to which he or she, whenever absent, intends to return. In other words, by claiming to be a resident of Maryland while representing California in the Congress, Schiff was able to get a tax break. From 2009 to 2019, Schiff continued to designate Maryland as his home and primary residence, making it clear that his pad in Burbank was not his true, fixed, or permanent residence by any stretch of the imagination. This fact indicates that he committed fraud discovered by Federal Housing and Finance Administrator Bill Pulte, and President Trump has now made sure that everyone knows about it. Today on X, President Trump said, "I've always suspected Shifty Adam Schiff was a scam artist, but I now learn that Fannie Mae's Financial Crimes Division has concluded that Adam Schiff engaged in a sustained pattern of possible mortgage fraud. Adam Schiff said his primary residence was in Maryland in order to get a cheaper mortgage and to rip off America when he must, by law, live in California because he was a congressman from California. I always knew Adam Schiff was a crook," he said. "If Adam Schiff goes to prison for tax fraud, he'll be getting off easy. In my opinion, he should be arrested and charged with treason for helping to falsify evidence and attempting to frame President Donald Trump as a Russian agent in order to remove him from office. There are charges that he should be faces, but Schiff's role in alleged mortgage fraud certainly adds to the case that this guy is just another crooked lowlife." I wrote a controversial piece this week in which I said that I thought the current laws regarding marijuana need to be reformed. There are thousands of ridiculous, antiquated, senseless, and counterproductive federal laws on the books, but perhaps none are more idiotic or incomprehensible as continuing to carry marijuana, cannabis, which millions of Americans use for legitimate medicinal purposes, as a Schedule I narcotic. This is a holdover from the drug war era, when understandable concerns about illicit drugs led to a moral panic that facilitated some of the worst constitutional abuses in history. Marijuana is in an even higher classification and considered more dangerous than cocaine, which is only a Schedule III drug. Heroin is also a Schedule III drug. This outdated misclassification makes it harder for scientists, first of all, to conduct additional tests on marijuana, and for veterans who use it for PTSD, as well as millions of other Americans who use it for legitimate medicinal purposes to acquire it. It is time for President Donald Trump, with the stroke of the pen, not to legalize marijuana, although I wouldn't be opposed to that, but at a minimum to reschedule it from Class 1 to Class 3, where it is viewed as a far less dangerous drug. 42 states now say it's legal for medicinal purposes. Let's do it now. You're tuned in to the Stone Zone with Roger Stone, and we'll be right back with more of the hot political news of the day.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Shopping is hard.
I can never find anything in my size.
I don't even know my size.
I buy my clothes the same place I buy my groceries.
There's a better way. Make it easy with Stitch Fix. Just share your size, style, budget, and done. Your personal stylist sends pieces picked just for you.
That was easy.
Stitch Fix. Online personal styling for everyone. Free shipping and returns. No subscription required. Get started today at stitchfix.com.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Stone Zone. Well, for the first time in decades, for the month of June, the United States actually ran a surplus. My good friend Anthony Constantino pointed out in X post that President Trump's tariffs brought in a record $27 billion in June. Despite propaganda from supposed free market economists, many who happen to be paid off by billionaire globalist Trump-hating Koch network, tariffs are in actuality paid by importers, not by U.S. taxpayers. The notion that tariffs are paid by taxpayers is false because vendors always look to sell for the highest possible price based on what the market will tolerate. They can't easily raise prices simply because costs go up or because no one is obligated to buy foreign goods or anything other than food, which can be produced domestically. We're not obliged to patronize foreign importers or companies with foreign supply chains. We buy food on local farms. We don't need to buy from globalist food chains. And because of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s Make America Healthy agenda being in the driver's seat when it comes to health policy within the White House, the food costs for healthy, local-sourced, home-grade food will be dropping in the very near future. So tariff revenue is far more preferable than tax revenue by the end of the day, and what we buy and the price we pay is up to us. It is important to point out, of course, that all of the Panicans said that tariff revenues or the tariff program would cause a rise in inflation. But in fact, inflation is low, unemployment is low. In fact, both inflation and unemployment are lower than they were the last time the Federal Reserve cut interest rates. So the bottom line of this is really simple. Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, who stoutly refuses to cut interest rates, but who cut them when both inflation and unemployment were higher than they are today in order to try to facilitate the reelection of Joe Biden, needs to cut interest rates on the American people today, or he needs to resign. With Congress investigating the $2.5 billion renovation of his palatial Washington headquarters, while the American people can't get a cut in interest rates, I think it's time for Mr. Powell to either cut rates or step down. If you're just tuning in, this is Roger Stone, and I'm in the Stone Zone. Joining me shortly, Rod Martin of the Rod Martin Report. The most interesting entrepreneurs and analysts out there will join us in the Stone Zone. We have a lot to talk about between Jeffrey Epstein, the situation in China, a lot on our plate here we want to get through. So whatever you do, please don't touch that dial. Stay in the zone with me, Roger Stone.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. Joining me now is Rod D. Martin. He's the founder and CEO of Martin Capital. But more importantly, he is the editor and publisher of a lively Substack, the Rod Martin Report. You also can find him at rodmartin.org. His political and economic analysis is always brilliant and provocative, and pleased to have him back with us today. Rod, welcome to the Stone Zone.
Wonderful to be here.
So you have a great piece on Russiagate. I myself have confirmed from my own sources that the massive deep state probe that we've all been waiting for is actually in the works and could be announced as soon as this week. The Justice Department and the FBI have been working on a massive case is going to make the MAGA base, I think, very happy. Now, my initial take on the CIA report released by CIA Director Radcliffe was that it was a shallow dive into the deep plot that began in the Oval Office when Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Susan Rice, CIA Director John Brennan, FBI Director James Comey, and others decided to try to frame Donald Trump and remove him from office based on a false premise that the Russians somehow aided in his election. You have a great piece on this. What is your take?
Well, first of all of that is correct, and thank you for having me. The truth is it was an attempted coup, and it started with overwhelming election interference in the 2016 election. Anything in the world to deflect from Hillary's very real scandals, and everything in the world to smear Donald Trump and all of his close associates, yourself included. So this is where it began. It failed massively. You may recall the book Shattered, in which we have a very useful account of Hillary on election night in 2016, pretty drunk, and deciding that this was the course of action to take. So, what we're seeing in the CIA report, which, as you say, is pretty shallow, but it's very preliminary, is that they knew that it was false. They knew what they were doing. Brennan perjured himself on this point. He's far from the only one. And the brilliance of what Kash Patel has just done is that by framing it as a grand conspiracy and an ongoing one, we get past the statute of limitations that would otherwise shelter some of these people and therefore let them profit from their 4 years of sort of Biden presidency.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very key point because you see Special Counsel John Durham, for some inexplicable reason, took 5 years to reach the conclusions that many of us had already reached and which many in the independent media had already reported. But he was running out the clock. He wanted to make sure that none of the conspirators could be charged, which is why he took 4 long years. And he never even addressed the question of whether the Democrat National Committee was in fact the target of an online hack by Russian intelligence. P.S. They weren't. There is no evidence to that. In fact, all of the forensic evidence is to the contrary. The download times of the material online points to the material being downloaded to some kind of portable drive and taken out the back door, as opposed to an online hack. Durham didn't even address those issues. Very specifically here, Brennan, who is quite the character, an admitted communist, who admitted to being a communist in a polygraph test, said he belonged to the Communist Party and voted for the Communist Party candidate for president. He is the same man who signed the visas for 4 of the 9/11 hijackers when he was the CIA station chief in Riyadh. He's a guy who got caught red-handed spying on a U.S. Senate committee that was investigating his illegal use of torture as the CIA director. And according to FBI counterterrorism expert John Guandolo, Brennan converted to Islam, to Wahhabism, in an elaborate ceremony when he was the station chief for the CIA in Saudi Arabia. That's quite a checkered past, but in this particular case, he is specifically nailed for insisting that the Steele dossier, this fraudulent report that he actually knew was fabricated and paid for by Hillary Clinton and her campaign, be included in President Barack Obama's intelligence assessment report so that they could then use it as the rationale for the entire witch hunt. They could use it as the rationale for spying on Donald Trump's campaign. They said that the Steele dossier was not the basis for which the FISA warrants were granted, but, well, that was a lie. They also used it as the rationale for the appointment of Robert Mueller and the kickoff of the witch hunt, with which I am, of course, extraordinarily familiar, having been a victim thereof. Do you think, Rod, that any of these characters will ever actually face trial in the United States?
Well, Kash Patel has made it possible. They weren't going to. Whether they will, my goodness, I really thought William Barr was going to do the right thing, and that turned out to be a huge mistake. And of course, I feel like I'm in good company, since Donald Trump clearly did too. But can we trust these people? I think we can. I think Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are straight shooters. I think Pam Bondi is clearly earning the confidence of the president, which he restated over the weekend. I don't know all the ins and outs of some of that. You've spoken really well to it, but this seems to be a team we should trust. The one that you didn't mention that I really hope we get back to, you alluded to it, is Seth Rich, because the truth of the matter is there's no way that the download could have happened other than with some kind of portable drive, as you correctly state, and suddenly we have in broad daylight a DNC staffer just gunned down. Well, gee, I wonder what went on there. And as you know, there was no meaningful investigation. It just gets shunted off the front page. And that needs addressing. Maybe nothing happened, but something probably did.
Well, we don't have, the FBI lost his computer. They can't find it. As did the security camera video from the bar that he left shortly before he was murdered. And frankly, if you talk about his murder, there's a reasonable chance that you'll be sued. His father went from saying this could not possibly have been a robbery because his jewelry, his wallet, his cash was all intact. But once a crisis management consultant paid for by the Democrat National Committee swooped in, now suddenly Seth Rich's parents are threatening to sue anyone who questions the circumstances of his death. I think it is very, very suspicious, to say the least. I agree with you, although in all honesty, having been through the process, any Democrat, any Trump hater who is charged in the District of Columbia will probably walk. First of all, you're going to get a rabid left-wing Trump-hating judge, like I had in my case. She specifically withheld totally exculpatory evidence from my defense attorneys. My lawyers, citing the fact that a person is entitled to have all evidence against them prior to trial, asked for Robert Mueller's final, completely unredacted report. And the judge denied it to us. She said that she would read the report in her chambers and she would give us the sections of the report that were germane to Roger Stone. What she gave us was unusable and incomprehensible. She, however, neglected to include the section on page 178 of his report in which even Mueller couldn't sugarcoat the fact that he'd found no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other crime on my part. Somehow the judge neglected to give that section to my attorneys. I have to put up with these endless attacks on social media regarding being called a Russian agent, and this nonsense of Guccifer 2.0, who is a persona that I had a brief exchange with on Twitter direct messages, which took place 3 months after WikiLeaks had already published all of the material from Hillary Clinton's campaign and from the DNC. So without a time machine, it would have been impossible for me to have been a conspirator in the hack of that material. But of course, try breaking through the fake news media din to make that point. It is virtually impossible.
Indeed. It's just Soviet justice. I mean, it is straight out of Venezuela. You could probably get a fairer trial in China than we get in the District of Columbia. And that's one of the most encouraging things about what Kash did. the way he is framing the case, there is the possibility of bringing cases outside of D.C., possibly even in Florida. And I think that we've got a real shot at a fair trial in some of those venues.
So I want to ask you, Rob, what you think of the auto pen scandal. The New York Times reported now that President Joe Biden did not review every single case, that the decision on who to use the auto pen to sign pardons was made by a staff member. Actually, I raised this question in my speech this weekend. Let's listen to that soundbite, if we may.
We also need a special prosecutor to investigate the origins of the COVID-19 vaccination. I call on the Attorney General to charge Anthony Fauci for lying to Congress. And when, in his legal defense, he argues that he cannot be charged because he has a preemptive pardon, the government can finally test the legality of the auto pen in which all of those documents should not be honored.
The point, of course, I made was that we should charge Dr. Anthony Fauci. And when we do, we could charge him with lying to Congress. Rand Paul, I saw today, is going to once again send another letter of referral to the Justice Department because Fauci lied under oath to the Senate when he said that U.S. taxpayers did not pay for gain of function, basically the weaponization of the COVID-19 vaccination in the Wuhan lab. That was a lie. Fauci's lawyers will then argue that he cannot be prosecuted because he has this preemptive pardon, which will allow the Trump administration to argue, no, the pardon you have is not valid because it was signed by an auto pen without the authorization of the President of the United States. President Trump has said this is a bigger scandal, perhaps, even than Russiagate or Watergate. What's your take on it, Rod?
That is correct. We have a legal term for what they did. It's forgery. And a forged document has no legal validity. So, you now have the New York Times saying plainly that the president, the supposed president, Joe Biden, is sitting there, just giving these kind of broad general approvals, didn't actually approve the individual cases, or at least some of them. I think this is completely assailable in court, and I think we have justices. I wouldn't have been so sure a year ago, but after the string of cases we've had in the last month or two, I think it's very, very clear that this Supreme Court is going to be open to an attack on these pardons, and not only these, but potentially other documents that were falsely signed by staff and not by the president. Article 2, Section 1 is very clear. The executive authority shall be vested in a president of the United States, not in a chief of staff, not in an independent agency, which is an abomination. We have a constitution. We have to follow it. We've got 6 justices who seem pretty committed to that. So I think we've got a shot.
All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, I'm talking to Rod Martin of the Rod Martin Report, which I highly recommend to you, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the zone. We're still with Rod D. Martin. He is the publisher and author of the Rod Martin Report. You can find him at rodmartin.org or go to substack.com and subscribe to the Rod Martin Report. It's one of the best writers and analysts there on Substack. We're pleased to have him today. I guess the 1-year anniversary of the attempt on Donald Trump's life was this past weekend. To me, it's amazing that we still don't have any answers regarding what happened that day. I'm not sure that Thomas Matthew Crooks is the shooter. I'm not certain that he didn't have Confederates. You've written about this, Rod. What is your take?
Well, it's just shameful that we're a year out and there have been 6 suspensions, but no firings. I mean, that day was just a train wreck, not least in their complete failure to clear off the exact site from which the shooter fired on the president and the crowd. I mean, it was just painfully obvious that this is where a shooter would want to go, and they didn't do it. And, of course, the Biden administration went out of its way to limit the president's security detail and apparently to limit the number of quality people on the detail. So I think it's just a travesty. We need to get to the bottom of it. I'm sure the president is very sure and very certain of where he's going with that, but we need some fundamental reform at the Secret Service.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that they hosed down the top of the building from the exact place where the shooter shot. Remind me when within hours, they hosed out the back of John F. Kennedy's limousine in Dallas November 22nd, 1963. But they didn't have DNA testing then. They do have it now, which is why I suspect that Crooks was cremated almost immediately after the assassination, and they hosed down the area from which he allegedly shot, perhaps to conceal the fact that there was no DNA match. Then we're told that the FBI can't get into his encrypted messages on his cell phone, which I'm sorry, I just don't believe. Of course they can. And Apple refuses to hand over from the cloud his material, saying it would be an invasion of his privacy. Yet Apple was more than happy to hand over the material from the iCloud, in my case, without even receiving a subpoena or a request to do so. No, something is rotten in Denmark. I think we need a special prosecutor to investigate both of the assassination attempts of President Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, and also in West Palm Beach, Florida. And as I've said before, while we're at it, we should investigate the attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan, because the government has never issued a report. All we have is a statement from Vice President George Bush telling us that it was thoroughly investigated and that the shooter, the accused shooter, acted alone. For me, that is not good enough. I'd like to know a lot more. I have been working on a book on the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. I'll give you a hint where it's going. The title of my book is Bushwhacked, the real story of the attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan. Should be out by Christmas. All right, I want to thank our guest, Rod Martin, for joining us today. Again, find him at rodmartin.org or go to substack.com and find the Rod Martin Report and subscribe. You'll be very glad you did. Until tomorrow, thank you for joining us in the Stone Zone. Until tomorrow, once again, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to the Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear the Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?